Hi, welcome to the Aftermath Tales. Ready for a new story? Very well, let's begin.
Oh, hey everyone, I have a question for you. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to watch your ex-husband destroy his own life without you lifting a single finger? To see karma work so perfectly that you almost feel sorry for him. Almost? Well, let me tell you my story. A story of the sweetest revenge that I never planned, never plotted, and never had to lift a finger to execute. Sometimes the universe has a wicked sense of humor, and sometimes the best vengeance is simply existing. They say the worst betrayals come wrapped in ordinary moments. A birthday dinner, a manila folder, a husband's smile at 2 a.m. I learned this on my 39th birthday, but let me start at the beginning. My name is Reese Andrews, and I thought I knew exactly who I was. I'm 38, 39 now, and for the past 3 years, I've been what people politely call a housewife. I dropped the Washington name the day the divorce was finalized, some things you just don't want to carry forward. Before that, I was the head accountant and vice president at D & Son Finance Corp., pulling in a salary that could make grown men weep with envy. I was good at what I did. More than good. I was exceptional. That's where I met Troy. Troy Washington walked into our offices 4 years ago as a mid-level manager, all confidence and charm in his perfectly pressed suits. He had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room when he spoke to you. At 44, he was mature, established, everything I thought I wanted in a man. The fact that he made less money than me? Well, that was just numbers on a paycheck. Except it wasn't, not to him. You see, Troy comes from the school of thought that says men should be the providers, the ones bringing home the bacon while their wives keep the home fires burning. Old-fashioned, maybe, but I found it endearing at first. Sweet, even. Here was a man who wanted to take care of me. The problem was, I was taking care of him. My salary dwarfed his. When we went out to dinner, I paid. When we talked about the future, about buying a house, about starting a family, it was my savings account we discussed. It ate at him, gnawed at his pride like acid on metal. So when he proposed, when he slipped that modest diamond ring on my finger and asked me to be his wife, he also asked me to be something else. Dependent. "Reese," he said, holding my hands in that Italian restaurant where we had our first date, "I want to provide for you the way a husband should. I want you to be able to focus on our family, our home. Richard will understand if you need to step away from work." Richard Dawson was our CEO then, a man who'd become something of a father figure to me. He'd hired me straight out of college, watched me climb the ranks, celebrated every promotion. When I told him about Troy's request, his weathered face creased with concern. "Reese, you're one of the brightest minds I've ever worked with. Are you sure about this?" I wasn't, but I was in love, and love makes you do stupid things. "Just for a while," I told him. "Until we get settled, maybe start a family." Richard nodded slowly. "The position will be here when you're ready to come back. I promise you that." He paused, then added, "And I want you to know how much we've appreciated your work here. There's a substantial bonus in your final paycheck. Consider it an investment in your future, whatever that may look like." That bonus, combined with my savings from years of smart financial planning, meant I wasn't walking away empty-handed. I'd always been careful with money, always planned ahead. It was one of the things that made me good at my job. That was 3 years ago. Richard retired 6 months later, handing the reins over to his son, Jacob. I remembered Jacob from when I first started at the company, just a 17-year-old kid doing clerical work during his school breaks. He never acted like the boss's son, never demanded special treatment. If anything, he worked twice as hard as everyone else, determined to prove he belonged. I respected that about him. Meanwhile, I threw myself into being the perfect wife. I learned to cook Troy's favorite meals, kept our house spotless, the house I'd bought with my savings and put in my name, managed our finances. I told myself this was temporary, that we were building something together. We talked about having children in those early days, but somehow it never happened. Troy always said we should wait until we were more financially stable, until he got his next promotion, until the timing was right. The timing was never right. As the years passed, Troy seemed to settle into our arrangement. He'd come home from work, eat the dinner I'd prepared, watch television while I cleaned up. We fell into a routine that felt less like marriage and more like a carefully choreographed performance. I looked very different now. Gone are the days where I took good care of myself. The stress of adjusting to a new life, the sedentary days, the cooking I'd taken up as a way to show love. I didn't think it was that noticeable. I stopped wearing makeup, I don't style my hair anymore. I still fit into most of my clothes, still felt attractive when I looked in the mirror. Troy noticed, though. He'd make little comments. Maybe you should join a gym. Are you sure you need dessert? Small cuts that I told myself came from a place of caring. I should have seen the signs. The late nights at work that became more frequent. The way he'd guard his phone, taking calls in the other room, the new cologne, the suddenly meticulous attention to his appearance. But I trusted him. I believed in us. I believed in the life we were building. I was such a big fool. I woke up on the morning of my 39th birthday with the kind of excitement I hadn't felt in years. Troy had been mysterious for weeks, dropping hints about a gift I'd never forget. He'd kissed me extra tenderly before leaving for work, promising tonight would be special. I spent the entire day preparing. I went to the grocery store and bought everything for his favorite meal, a pot roast with all the trimmings. I seasoned the meat just the way he liked it. Lafayette slow-cooked it until it was falling apart tender. The mashed potatoes were whipped to creamy perfection, the green beans sautéed with almonds. I even pulled out my best dress. It wasn't new. We couldn't afford new dresses on Troy's salary, but it was a deep blue number that used to make him tell me I looked beautiful. It still fit, mostly, though it was a bit snugger than it used to be. By 5:30, everything was ready. The table was set with our good china, the candles were lit, and the food was staying warm in the oven. I primped in the bathroom mirror, applied fresh lipstick, and waited for the sound of his key in the door. 6 o'clock came and went, then 7, then 8. I tried calling him, but it went straight to voicemail. "Hi, you've reached Troy Washington. Leave a message and I'll get back to you." That cheerful, professional voice that had charmed me 4 years ago now felt like a mockery. I called his office, knowing it was pointless. D & Son Finance Corp closed at 5:30 sharp, and no one would be there to answer. Still, I let it ring, clinging to the hope that maybe he was working late, that maybe he'd pick up. Nothing. I sent text after text. "Where are you? The food is getting cold. Are you okay? Please call me." By 8:30, I was pacing the kitchen, my heels clicking against the linoleum floor. The pot roast was drying out despite the foil covering. The mashed potatoes had formed a skin on top. The candles had burned down to nubs. By 9 o'clock, I had run out of excuses to make for him. I sat in that dining room for 5 more hours. I blew out the candles when they got too low, worried about fire. I moved the food to the refrigerator when it became clear it wouldn't be eaten tonight. I took off my heels when my feet started to ache. But I stayed in that dress. I stayed at that table. I waited. At exactly 2 a.m., I heard the familiar sound of Troy's key in the lock. My heart should have been relieved, but instead it hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. He walked into the house whistling. Whistling. Like this was any other night, like he hadn't just missed his wife's birthday dinner, like he hadn't ignored 17 phone calls and 23 text messages. When he saw me sitting there in the dark dining room, he stopped. The whistling died on his lips. "Oh, Reese, hi." He looked at the cold dinner table, the blown-out candles, me in my wrinkled blue dress. "I'm so sorry, happy birthday." He said it like he was reading from a cue card. "Can you warm up the food?" Can you warm up the food? Not, "I'm sorry I missed dinner." Not, "I'm sorry I ruined your birthday." Not, "I'm sorry I've been ignoring your calls for 8 hours." Can you warm up the food? I stood up like a robot, like some pre-programmed housewife android, and walked to the kitchen. I reheated his plate in the microwave, the same microwave I'd used to reheat my own dinner 3 hours earlier when I finally gave up waiting and forced myself to eat something. He wasn't drunk. I would have smelled it on him, would have seen it in his walk. He wasn't sick or injured or dealing with some emergency. He was just late. Casually, carelessly late. He ate in silence, the only sound the scraping of forks against plates. The pot roast that had been so tender and perfect 6 hours ago now tasted like cardboard in my mouth. Finally, I found my voice. "Where were you?" He looked up from his plate, a piece of potato halfway to his mouth. "I was with Beatrice." Beatrice Simmons, his secretary. 26 years old, blonde, with the kind of figure that made men walk into glass doors. "Until 2 a.m.? My voice sounded strange, distant, like it was coming from someone else. "We had some things to work on." "What kind of things require working until 2 a.m. on your wife's birthday?" He set down his fork and looked at me with the kind of patience you'd show a slow child. "Business things, Reese, you wouldn't understand." I wouldn't understand. I, who used to run the accounting department of an entire financial corporation. I wouldn't understand business. "Actually," he said, standing up from the table, "before we go any further, there's something I need you to sign." He walked to the living room and returned with his briefcase, pulling out a manila folder like it was the most normal thing in the world. Like people regularly served legal documents at 2:30 a.m. over reheated pot roast. He slid the folder across the table to me. "What is this?" But even as I asked, I knew. Some primal part of me, some ancient female intuition, already knew. "Divorce papers." The words hung in the air between us like smoke. Divorce papers. I stared at the manila folder as if it might explode if I touched it. I don't understand. But I was beginning to. Oh God, I was beginning to. Troy sat back down, his demeanor suddenly businesslike, as if we were discussing mortgage rates instead of the end of our marriage. "I've fallen in love with someone else, Reese, with Beatrice. How long?" The question came out as a whisper. 8 months. 8 months. While I was cooking his favorite meals and keeping his house and managing his finances and believing in our future together, he'd been building a new life with his secretary. "Why?" I asked, and immediately hated myself for it. Why do we always ask why, as if betrayal follows some logical pattern we can decode? He looked at me then, really looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes was worse than anger or guilt. It was indifference. Cold, clinical indifference. "Have you looked at yourself in the mirror lately?" he said. "You've let yourself go, Reese. I don't see you attractive anymore." The words hit me like physical blows. "I let myself go," he says. "I fell out of love with you a long time ago," he continued, his voice taking on that patronizing tone I'd grown to hate. "People change, you know. I've been seeing Betty for 8 months now, and have you seen her? She's drop-dead gorgeous, isn't she?" Betty. He called her Betty. Yeah, like they had pet names and inside jokes and a whole relationship I knew nothing about. "She gives me excitement in this life which you can't provide anymore," he said, cutting into his pot roast like we were discussing the weather. "You've let yourself go." I sat there in my wrinkled blue dress, the dress I'd thought made me look beautiful just hours earlier, and felt something inside me crumble. Not break, that would be too clean, too definitive. Crumble, like old mortar between bricks, leaving everything unstable and ready to fall. "I was loyal to you," I said. My voice sounded small, defeated. "I gave up my career for you. I've been a good wife." "Have you?" He raised an eyebrow. "A good wife doesn't let herself go like this. A good wife makes an effort." I thought about all the efforts I'd made. Learning to cook his favorite meals from scratch, keeping the house spotless, managing our finances so we could live comfortably on his smaller salary, being there for every company party, every work event, smiling and nodding and playing the supportive wife while he climbed a ladder I'd already been at the top of. "I want you to sign the papers tonight," he said. "Betty and we want to move forward with our lives." "Tonight?" I looked at the clock on the kitchen wall. It was almost 3 a.m. My birthday had ended hours ago. "You want me to sign divorce papers hours after my birthday? Don't you think you're being too cruel?" "It would be easier if we could get this process started quickly," he said, not meeting my eyes. Easier for whom? I wanted to ask, but I already knew the answer. I opened the folder with trembling hands. The legal language swam before my eyes, but I could make out the basics. Irreconcilable differences. Division of assets. Though what could he possibly claim? The house was mine, bought before our marriage with my savings and my grandmother's inheritance. Everything of value was mine. I stared at the signature line, my name typed out in clinical black letters. Reese Andrews Washington. Soon I'd go back to being just Reese Andrews. Some names aren't worth keeping. There's a pen in my briefcase, Troy said helpfully. I looked at him. There he is. The man I'd fallen in love with, the man I'd given up everything for, the man who'd promised to love and cherish me for better or worse. He was already gone, wasn't he? He'd been gone for 8 months, maybe longer. I'd just been too stupid, too trusting, too hopeful to see it. But I won't let him destroy me like this. You need to leave, I said quietly. What? He asked, surprised. This is my house, Troy. I bought it with my inheritance and savings before we even met. It's in my name, and I want you out. Tonight. For the first time since he'd walked through the door, he looked genuinely surprised. Reese, be reasonable. We're married. I have rights to half of everything. I tilted my head and gave him the sweetest petty smile I could muster. Ah, Troy, you didn't know that this house is mine? That I bought it before we even met with my inheritance and savings? That's so cute that you thought you had any claim to my assets. His confident demeanor started to crack. You can't just throw me out. Oh, darling, but I can. I stood up, the folder still in my hands, my voice dripping with fake sympathy. And Troy, you didn't know that I can demand alimony from you? And that I can sue your little side piece for alienation of affection? Poor baby. You really didn't think this through, did you? His face went pale. You can't sue Betty. She didn't do anything wrong. I laughed. I actually laughed. Oh, sweetie, she knowingly had an affair with a married man for 8 months. That's textbook alienation of affection. But boy, oh boy, you probably didn't know that because you're not actually that smart, huh? I walked closer to him, my voice getting softer and more condescending. You know what the funniest part is, Troy? You thought I needed you. You thought I was some helpless little housewife who would just roll over and take whatever scraps you threw at me. But here's the thing. I was the VP of a financial company before I met you. I made more money than you ever will. I own this house, I have my own savings, and honey, what do you have? Astronomical credit card debts from luxury stores, that's what you have. Think that I never notice? I can live without you just fine. Better than fine, actually. His mouth opened and closed like a fish. Reese. The question is, I continued, savoring every word, can you afford me? Because by the time I'm done with you and your precious Betty, you're going to wish you just stayed faithful. Now get the heck out of my house! After he left, slamming the door behind him like a petulant child, I stood in my kitchen and finally let myself feel it all. The rage came first, white-hot and consuming. I wanted to scream, to throw things, to make him hurt the way he'd hurt me. Then came the grief, crashing over me like a tidal wave. I sobbed. Not the quiet, dignified tears of a woman maintaining her composure, but ugly, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere deep in my chest. I cried for the 3 years I'd wasted trying to be the perfect wife. I cried for the career I'd given up, the identity I'd lost, the dreams I'd put on hold for a man who'd been planning his exit strategy for 8 months. I cried until my throat was raw and my eyes were swollen shut. I cried until there was nothing left inside me but emptiness and the faint flickering ember of something that might have been anger or might have been determination. The divorce proceedings went exactly as I'd promised. Troy tried to fight for the house at first, until his lawyer explained that assets acquired before marriage weren't community property. When I followed through on my threat to sue Betty, she panicked and begged Troy to settle out of court. He took out a substantial loan to pay both my alimony settlement and Betty's legal fees. 6 months later, I signed the final papers and walked out of the courthouse a free woman. That night, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror and barely recognized the person staring back at me. Pale, hollow-cheeked, wearing clothes that hung on my frame like a scarecrow's outfit. I looked like a ghost of myself. No more, I said to my reflection. No more. The next morning, I joined a gym. I also made an appointment with a stylist who cut off 6 inches of my lifeless hair and gave me layers that framed my face. I went shopping and bought clothes that actually fit, clothes that made me feel like a woman instead someone hiding in oversized sweaters. I ate properly for the first time in months. I took vitamins. I went for walks in my neighborhood and remembered what fresh air felt like in my lungs. Slowly, gradually, I started to look like myself again, or maybe a better version of myself. The woman in the mirror had a strength in her eyes that hadn't been there before, born from surviving betrayal and coming out the other side. 3 months later, I ran into Anna Martinez at the grocery store. Anna had been one of the junior accountants when I worked at D & Son, and we'd stayed friendly over the years. "Reese," she said, her eyes lighting up. "You look amazing." "Thanks," I said. "I've been taking better care of myself." Anna glanced around, then leaned in conspiratorially. "Did you hear about Beatrice Simmons?" My stomach tightened, but I kept my expression neutral. "What about her?" "She quit last month. Just up and left to become a housewife. Can you believe it? Everyone in the office knew about her and Troy Washington. It was the worst-kept secret in the building." "Anyway," Anna continued, "Jacob's been asking about you. He said something about how the company's never been the same since you left." A few weeks after that conversation, I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. D & Son Finance Corp., Jacob Dawson's office. "Hi, this is Reese Andrews. I'd like to speak with Jacob about returning to work." Jacob called me back within 5 minutes. "Reese, I'm so glad you called. I'm sorry about what happened with Troy. The whole office, well, let's just say it wasn't exactly a secret." I laughed. "Office gossip travels fast, doesn't it? Like wildfire. Listen, I'd love to have you back, but not as VP. How would you feel about SVP of accounting? You'd be overseeing all financial reporting across all branches." A promotion. After everything Troy had put me through, I was getting a promotion. 2 weeks before I was scheduled to start, Sam Hughes called me. Sam had been friends with both Troy and me since our early days at the company, and he'd been caught in the middle when everything fell apart. "Reese, I have to tell you something," he said without preamble. "I warned Troy he was making the biggest mistake of his life when he divorced you. I told him Betty was a gold digger, but he wouldn't listen." I settled into my couch with a cup of coffee. "Oh, really?" "She's exactly what I thought she'd be. She doesn't clean, doesn't cook, doesn't even wash his clothes. She uses his credit card to go shopping for expensive designer stuff while their apartment looks like a tornado hit it. Troy's been complaining to anyone who'll listen that all she can manage is opening cans or reheating leftovers." I tried to keep the satisfaction out of my voice. "That sounds challenging. And now she's pregnant, which has somehow made her attitude even worse. She's demanding he buy her a bigger place, a new car, designer maternity clothes. The guy's drowning in debt, and she's acting like he's her personal ATM." Sam paused. "I just thought you should know what you're walking into when you come back. Troy's not exactly thriving." "Oh, boy." "Well, what can we do, right? That was his choice," I said. 1 month later, I walked through the doors of D & Son Finance Corp. Wearing a perfectly tailored suit and my best smile. My first day back, and I felt like I was home. The reception was everything I could have hoped for. Linda from HR practically squealed when she saw me. "Reese, oh my God, you look incredible. We've missed you so much." As I made my way through the office, it was like a homecoming parade. People I'd worked with for years stopped to welcome me back, to tell me how things hadn't been the same since I left, how excited they were to have me return. And then I saw Troy. He was coming out of the break room with a cup of coffee, and when our eyes met, his face went through about 5 different emotions in rapid succession. Surprise, panic, confusion, and finally something that looked like dread. "Reese." He nodded stiffly. "I heard you were coming back." "Troy." I smiled pleasantly. "I heard about Betty. Congratulations on the pregnancy. How exciting for you." He looked like he wanted to say something else, but Jacob appeared at my elbow. "Reese, perfect timing. Let me show you to your new office. It's corner office on the 3rd floor with a view of the city. I think you'll love it." He turned to Troy with barely concealed disdain. "Troy, don't you have those quarterly reports to finish? The board meeting is next week." As Jacob led me away, I could feel Troy's eyes boring into my back. Ah, poor guy. He was probably just now realizing that his ex-wife, the unattractive ex-wife, was now his superior. The woman he'd thrown away for a gold-digging secretary was now in a position to review and approve his work expenses. My new office was everything Jacob had promised. floor-to-ceiling windows, a beautiful desk that was twice the size of my old one, and a title placard that read, Reese Andrews, SVP Accounting. I settled into my chair and opened my laptop. Next week's board meeting was going to be very interesting indeed. 1 week later, I walked into the quarterly company meeting like I owned the place, which, in many ways, I did. The boardroom was full of managers from all branches, including Troy, who looked distinctly uncomfortable. Everyone knew about his affair with his subordinate. The company wasn't strict about office relationships, but they didn't appreciate the drama Betty had brought. She'd been an office bully, and HR had been looking for reasons to let her go even before the affair became public knowledge. The other managers greeted me warmly as I took my seat at the conference table. Reese, so good to have you back. We've missed you. The numbers haven't been the same without you. Troy's face went white when he saw me. I gave him my brightest, most professional smile. Jacob stood up to address the room. Before we begin today's financial reports, I'd like to announce that Reese Andrews has rejoined our team as Senior Vice President of Accounting. She'll be overseeing all financial reporting and will be reviewing any discrepancies in our quarterly numbers. The applause was genuine and enthusiastic. I was back, and I was Troy's superior. Now, Jacob continued, let's start with the quarterly reports. Troy, you're up first. I watched Troy's hands shake slightly as he gathered his papers. He had to present his department's financial performance to the entire room, including his ex-wife, who was now in a position to question every number, every decision, every discrepancy in his report. Oh, this was going to be fun. Troy stood up, cleared his throat, and began his presentation. Good morning, everyone. I'm pleased to report that my department has met most of our quarterly targets. His voice was steady at first, but I could see the nervous energy in the way he kept glancing at me. He went through his slides methodically, revenue numbers, expense reports, departmental spending. To his credit, he'd always been adequate at presentations, though he lacked the commanding presence that came naturally to people who truly understood the numbers they were presenting. When he finished, the room was quiet for a moment. All eyes turned to me. I opened my copy of his report and adjusted my reading glasses, a new addition since my makeover that made me look both sophisticated and intimidating. Thank you for that presentation, Troy. I have a few questions, if you don't mind. Of course. He tried to smile, but it came out more like a grimace. I flipped through the pages slowly, letting the silence build. I'm looking at your Q3 expense report, and I notice an interesting discrepancy. I looked up at him with my most professional expression. There's a line item here for client entertainment, totaling $3,200 in a single evening. That's quite substantial for one night. Troy's face went a shade paler. Yes, well, we had an important client dinner at Le Bernardin in New York, I read from the report, on September 15th. That's right, he nervously replied. I tilted my head slightly. That's interesting, because September 15th was a Tuesday, and according to our client database, we don't have any major accounts based in New York that would warrant that level of entertainment expense. I paused, letting that sink in. Could you tell us which client this was for? The room was dead silent. Everyone was watching Troy squirm. Well, it was a potential client. We were trying to secure new business. Ah, I see. I made a note on my pad. And do you have the invoice for this expense? Because typically, client entertainment of this magnitude requires pre-approval from the SVP level, and I don't see any authorization paperwork in your file. Troy's shirt was starting to show sweat stains. The invoice should be with accounting. Sarah Mitchell, our accounting manager, looked up from her notes. Actually, Troy, my department has been requesting that invoice from you for 6 weeks now. You still haven't provided it. Troy's face went from pale to red. There must have been some miscommunication. No miscommunication, Sarah continued matter-of-factly. We've sent 3 emails requesting documentation for the $3,200 charge on the company credit card. The charge shows as miscellaneous expenses with no supporting documentation. I could see George Martin, Troy's direct supervisor, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. George caught my eye and gave an almost imperceptible nod. Actually, George spoke up, Sarah brought this discrepancy to my attention last month. I've already escalated it to you, Reese, as per our new protocols. Troy looked like a deer caught in headlights. He'd been counting on the old system where these things got buried in paperwork, where no one was really watching the numbers closely enough to catch him. But I was watching. Very closely. So let me understand this correctly, I said, my voice calm and professional. You charged $3,200 to the company credit card with no pre-approval, no documentation, no invoice, and when accounting has repeatedly requested verification, you've provided nothing. The implications were crystal clear to everyone in the room. This wasn't just poor record-keeping. This was potential embezzlement. Jacob leaned forward. Troy, I think we're going to need to see that documentation by end of business today, along with a detailed explanation of what this charge was for and why you never submitted it on time. And Troy, I added with a sweet smile, moving forward, please remember that all expenses over $500 require prior approval and proper documentation. I'd hate for there to be any compliance issues. Troy sat down heavily, his presentation forgotten. Around the table, I could see the other managers exchanging glances. Everyone understood what had just happened. I'd just professionally destroyed my ex-husband without raising my voice or breaking a sweat. The aftermath was swift and merciless. Troy never did produce that invoice, because, of course, there wasn't one. The $3,200 had been spent on a weekend getaway with Betty to celebrate her new beginning as his housewife, all charged to the company credit card like it was his personal expense account. By the end of the week, Troy was placed on administrative leave pending a full financial audit of his department. The investigation revealed 3 other questionable expenses over the past year, totaling nearly $8,000 in unauthorized charges. He was terminated for cause 2 weeks later. No severance package, no references, and a permanent black mark on his employment record. In the financial industry, word travels fast about managers who embezzle company funds. His career was effectively over. Betty, meanwhile, was dealing with her own reality check. Without Troy's income and drowning in debt from the divorce settlement, they had to move out of their apartment into a cheaper place across town. The designer shopping sprees came to an abrupt halt. The pregnancy, which she'd thought would secure her future, now felt like a trap with a man whose life was falling apart. Sam called me a month later with updates. Betty's working at a retail store now, he said, barely containing his amusement. Pregnant and on her feet all day, folding clothes at some department store. Troy's been applying everywhere, but his reputation precedes him. Last I heard, he was considering taking a job at a small accounting firm for half his old salary. I found out just how miserable Betty's new reality was, quite by accident. I was shopping for a new blazer at Nordstrom Rack when I spotted a familiar blonde head at the checkout counter. Betty. She looked tired, her pregnancy showing, wearing the store's uniform polo shirt. I didn't approach her. I had no desire for confrontation. But as I browsed the clearance rack nearby, I couldn't help but overhear when she started giving an awful attitude to the customer in front of me. Look, I already told you we can't return this without a receipt, Betty snapped, her voice dripping with the same condescension she used to use on junior employees. Store policy is store policy. The customer, an elderly woman, looked flustered. But I just bought it yesterday. Ma'am, next time, bring someone younger with you who can actually understand rules. And you should have kept your receipt, Betty interrupted rudely. That's when a younger woman in a manager's badge appeared behind the counter. Beatrice, she said sharply, this is the 3rd time this week I've seen you giving customers attitude. I've been lenient because of your condition, but this stops now. Apologize to our customer, now! Betty's face went crimson. In front of a growing line of customers, including her ex-husband's ex-wife watching from 3 feet away, she had to swallow her pride. I apologize for my tone, she mumbled to the elderly woman. Better, the manager said. Now help her with the return. And Beatrice, one more incident and we'll be having a very different conversation. I quietly left the store, my new blazer forgotten, but my day absolutely made. Sometimes, karma doesn't just find you, it puts on a show. As for me, I was thriving. The company was running more efficiently than it had in years. Jacob had given me carte blanche to implement new financial controls and oversight procedures. I was doing what I'd always been meant to do, and doing it brilliantly. I hadn't plotted any elaborate revenge scheme. I hadn't needed to. I'd simply returned to work, done my job with the competence and integrity I'd always possessed, and let Troy's own choices catch up with him. He'd destroyed himself the moment he decided to steal from the company to fund his affair. All I did was what any good SVP would do: ask the right questions and demand proper documentation. Troy's humiliation wasn't my revenge. It was simply the natural consequence of his own stupidity and greed. Sometimes the best revenge is no revenge at all. Sometimes you just have to step back and let people dig their own graves. 6 months after that boardroom meeting, I received an invitation to the company's annual awards dinner. When they called my name for Executive of the Year, I walked to that podium, smiled at the applauding crowd, and thought about how far I'd come. From a discarded housewife to the most respected executive in the company. From someone who'd been told she was unattractive to someone who commanded respect in every room she entered. It was time to stop being somebody's discarded wife. It was time to remember who I used to be. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to become someone even better. And I had.
If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and drop a comment below. Don't forget to follow for more content just like this. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time.